Bon après-midi à tous et bienvenue à cette rencontre du comité de dérogation pour la ville d'Ottawa. Welcome everyone to this public hearing of for the Committee of Adjustment for the City of Ottawa. Sorry about that. We're panel 1, we're the urban panel. S'il y en a qui aimeraient avoir les consignes en français, vous n'avez rien qu'à donner signe. We are a City of Ottawa quasi-judicial tribunal that holds public hearings to consider Planning Act applications, including minor variants and consents to sever land and increasingly permissions as well. You'll see those. Our hearings are back to being in person. However, as you can tell, the committee does enable participation through video conferencing. And when so requested, all you need to do is speak with committee staff in order to make that happen. The panels, for the most part, are trying to be back in person as much as possible. We are live streaming on YouTube, and the video will be archived along with the agenda for your review or your reference, and it's on the committee's website. So my name is Anne Tremblay, and I'll be chairing the hearing today, and with me are a couple of guest panel members. So we have Mr. Bill Hunter, who's joining us from panel 3, and we also have Mr. Jay Baltz, who's joining us from panel 2 normally. So also with us is member Keklikan, and online, not quite yet, is member Blatherwick, who will be joining us soon. All right, in terms of the procedures, the hearings will unfold essentially as follows. So you saw an agenda at the beginning of the hearing. The chair has a discretion to move the items around or deal with items in a different order. Today, I think we're going to deal with a couple of matters, but generally speaking, we're going to stick to the order of the agenda. So panel members have reviewed all of the materials related to the applications before us today, including the planning reports and any submissions in support or in opposition. So really today, what we're looking for is to get any oral submissions, any additional evidence that would be important for the committee's consideration on an application. So as part of the statutory public notification requirements, each applicant is required to post a sign on the property and then to submit written, either a hard copy sign posting declaration, or then we can do an oath as well. In this case, I believe all of these stat decks are in, so we don't have any issue in that regard. So in terms of how we're going to deal with applications, sometimes we ask for a presentation. Sometimes we simply ask for, we just go to questions. It depends on the complexity of the application and just how controversial a matter may be. So, and once we've had a chance to hear from the applicant, ask some questions, and sometimes we can ask questions from planning staff, we then go to the public consultations component. And so I do have a speakers list. So I start with that, and then I make a general call out to anyone who may have an interest in the application, whether you're in support or whether you're opposed to the application. When you come down, if your name is on the list, then all you need to do is give me your name. We already have your address. But if you're not on the list, then what I would ask for you to do is clearly state your name. I may need you to in fact spell your last name, and then I will need your municipal address. All of that, of course, is to ensure that we have as complete a record as possible. Then, in terms of how much time you have to address the committee, there's a 5-minute rule, essentially, and any exceptions are up to the committee chair. So at the end of the hearing on an application, a panel can make either an oral decision, or we can reserve our decision. And in the latter case, the committee's decision will not be delivered during the course of the hearing, but we will make a decision today. So it's not that we go home and then think about it and write in our thoughts. We make a decision before we leave. And in all cases, and within 10 days, the Committee of Adjustment will send the official written decision and reasons for it to all of the parties, participants, and anyone else who has requested a copy of the decision. So that's essentially our rules. I need to ask if there's any members who have declarations of conflict of interest from our panel or any of the other panels.
Madam Chair, thank you. Property in question in item 4 is in my neighborhood, and so I will be excusing myself from those discussions to avoid any perception of conflict.
All right, thank you. Anyone else?
Madam Chair, I'll declare interest in item 3, 72 Armstrong. I previously have been involved in writing comments for the Hintonburg Community Association on previous applications related to that property.
All right, thank you. With that, then we can go to the minutes. I believe we have two sets of minutes to adopt. Just a minute, bear with me. I know I have a list somewhere. I think it's the March 6th and the March 20th. Thank you very much. Okay, so we've had a chance to review those minutes. I'm just looking for endorsement of the minutes of March 6th. Anyone have an issue? Otherwise, they're going to be considered endorsed. Okay, we're good there. How about the March 20th minutes? Anyone have any comments? All right, so the minutes of March 20th are also adopted. Okay, now onto our agenda. We're going to call down, even though we don't have any adjournments, any official adjournments, I'd like to call down application number 6, which is for 370 Athlon. And we're going to speak to first the possibility of adjournment. And if we decide to hear the application, then you're already in the right place. So we can move on with that. And the reason why we are calling you down for this, and we're going to need some input from Ms. Linker as well on this, has to do with some of the concerns that staff has articulated in their planning report. So Ms. McQuaig, have you seen the planning report? You've had a chance to read it?
Yes, I have seen the planning report and I've had a chance to read it, and we do have responses to those concerns within our presentation today.
All right, so Ms. Linker, I'm going to go to you then. So for the committee, there was a bit of a red flag raised with a statement in your report, which talks about elements that may in fact be indicative that there is perhaps too many units being proposed for the property. Did you want to elaborate on those comments just so that we have a better understanding?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Staff have spoken over the last few weeks with the applicant about our concerns, and the applicant has decided to move forward. But just to summarize, we have no concerns with the development and generally support intensification on the subject site. However, staff have some concerns about justifying the increase of density due to our general concerns, specifically about the elements of the ramp and the waste storage. And for the ramp, typically with an external ramp, you see that commonly with building conversions where it's difficult to alter an interior. But with the new builds, we usually expect that the building design provides accessible entrances, taking it into account of internalizing it. And since this is a new build, we wanted the applicant to explore those different options of internalizing that ramp or accessible entrance. Regarding the waste, it's zoning compliant. But the waste storage is located at the rear and closely to the rear facing balconies, and staff had those concerns about noisy and odorous conditions that could be created as a result of this, despite being zoning compliant. So staff believes that either a greater rear yard setback beyond what's required in the zoning bylaw or internalizing the waste storage would result in better living conditions for the residents. And then that in turn might result in fewer units. So it was staff's general opinion that perhaps if they had fewer units, they could better accommodate for these elements on the site.
All right, so Ms. Linker, in terms of process, the application is in pre-consultation for site plan control, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And can you tell us where that's in pre-consultation? So I just want to, Ms. McQuaig, for you to understand is that the committee generally doesn't like to piecemeal the review of minor variances on any properties. So to the extent that we can know about them in advance is beneficial. So I just want to make sure that there's enough process that has gone underway that there won't be any significant changes. So, and I think what we're hearing from staff is that there's a possibility. So just need to know where we're at in terms of the process. So Ms. Linker, back to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The subject development has been under review for a phase 1 pre-consult process. And we let them know that if not a lot of changes are expected to happen, they could skip over phase 2 and go straight to phase 3. And then after phase 3, we get all of our final comments about completeness of the studies, and then they can formally apply for site plan control. If a lot of changes were expected, we anticipated them to go to a phase 2, which would be more detailed comments again. So phase 1 and phase 2 are more detailed comments. Phase 3 would have been a review of just the reports and studies for completeness. So at this time, if they continued as is, and if the minor variances were approved, they would continue to phase 3 to see the completeness of the documents and then apply for formal submission. If it was refused and they had to redesign, if they did want to redesign, then they would go to a phase 2 pre-consult for more detailed comments from staff again.
All right, so back to you, Ms. McQuaid. Then is it the intent of the applicant to skip phase 2, or where do you see yourself right now in terms of the process?
So, Madam Chair, when this item was on the agenda from a former committee, this was an adjournment. We did speak with staff and we were aware of their concerns then. The way we addressed it was to do a partial feedback submission as part of the site plan control process to specifically review how we plan to address these items. As I do see them more as site plan related items, the built form does comply with the zoning. So whether the units are reduced or not, that form is permitted as of right. The handicapped accessible space is buffered from the streetscape. There's a number of ways that we've addressed this, and we have provided those submission comments as a partial feedback response through the site plan control.
And
So-
have you received response from the cities on all those proposals?
We did meet with staff and they are aware of the methods in which we have in place to address their concerns. They maintain some concerns, but the items that we are seeking do comply with the zoning. And the variances being sought meet the 4 tests, which I can go through today.
So my next question to you, Ms. McCraig, is do you think it would be of benefit to you at this point to get further along in that phase 2 or to undertake the phase 2 in order to ensure that the proposal that's before us is in fact the one that's going to go to site plan?
Given the additional comments that we've had and the conversations that we've had with staff, I don't expect significant changes given what the permissions are on the site currently. And at this point, the committee of adjustment component does have to be complete before it goes to formal submission for site plan. So there's really only the one remaining step left.
So we understand that we're a little bit into this, I guess, if you compare it to the way we used to deal with things, a little bit the cart before the horse. But now we're understanding that so there used to be a prematurity with regards to where it is in the site plan, but now there seems to be that there's a possibility of prematurity with regards to where it's at in the pre-consultation. So that's sort of my question to you is, you know, if you thought maybe another month or 6 weeks of working through that site plan, getting responses from the city so that you can confirm to us that in fact, every one of the proposals that you have outlined is satisfactory to staff. I'm just asking you whether or not you would like the opportunity to have that extra time to ensure that the committee is dealing with the right site plan application, or not site plan application, but the right site plan for our consideration.
Madam Chair, I do believe we have discussed those concerns extensively with staff and identified how we plan to respond to those concerns, and they won't result in changes to the site plan as proposed.
All right, in that case, I think we're ready to hear your application. Before we proceed, though, I just want to make note of application number 4. When we get to it, we may want to hear from you, Ms. Linker, before we proceed with that application too, but I don't want to call it down right now for possible adjournment. I prefer that we deal with this application first and then get into our agenda. And then we'll deal with it at the time that we call application number 4. Okay, so with that, looking for a full presentation. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. So just for everyone's knowledge, my name is Christine McQuaig. I am the agent on this application. With me is David Aston, the property owner. If you could pull up my presentation. Thank you. So the subject site is 370 Athlone Avenue. The minor variances being sought today are to permit 16 units where 12 are permitted, to permit 0 resident parking spaces where 2 are required, and to permit reductions for the accessory setback, 0.15 meters at the rear where 0.60 is required, and 0.5 meters on the interior side where 0.6 is required. The subject site is on the west side of Athlone Avenue, located between Richmond Road and Scott Street. Next slide, please. The official plan designation is neighborhood within an evolving overlay due to its proximity to transit and Main Street corridors. In the interurban transect, the subject zone of the site is R4UB, the residential fourth density. Next slide, please. The site has a lot width of 15.24 meters, a depth of 33.47 meters, and a total lot area of 508.17 square meters. And these are some images, both aerial and street facing, of the subject property. Next slide, please. This identifies the subject site's location and generally what's around it, both LRT stations, Lions Park, Richmond Road Commercial, and other transit availability on Scott Street. Next slide, please. So here are some images. The bottom left is a view of the subject site on that west side of Athlone. Above that is the opposite side of Athlone with two multi-unit developments, which you can see a little bit better in the bottom right image. The two images to the top right are similar developments for 16-unit low-rise apartments on similarly sized lots, both with similar site plan configurations that are either approved or going through approvals as well at this time. Next slide, please. The proposal is for a 16-unit low-rise. We would be demolishing the existing one-story building, constructing 16 units over 3 stories, one-to-one bike parking ratio. All setbacks for the proposed building are met, and all landscaping requirements are also met. There's no provided resident parking. The balconies project actually under the 2-meter allowance, and there's privacy screening on both sides of the balcony, both in the front and the back of the subject dwelling. Next slide, please. So this is a sort of colored version of the site plan, removing sort of dimensional lines just to show the building on the lot and the accessory structure in the rear yard, as well as a bit of landscaping. This particular site plan doesn't show trees, but we do have a landscape plan showing trees. Next slide. This is the proposed site plan, just the basic format, showing the walkway along the front, the accessibility ramp towards the bottom of the page, and then the accessory structures in the rear yard. Next slide, please. These are some 3D renders of the proposed development. Of note is the image on the left, where you see the shrubs and bushes in front. The accessible ramp is actually behind that. And there's also hydro corridor, hydro utility in that section as well. And so we can't have trees in the front yard because of the hydro. And we also had to set back the 3rd-story balconies because of the hydro setback as well. So we were able to effectively buffer the accessibility ramp from the public realm without impacting tree provision or landscaping requirements in the front yard. Next slide, please. These are just some additional renders of the subject property. Next slide. So I've gone through the requested variances at the outset of the presentation, so I'll move on to the 4 tests. Next slide. So when we discuss whether the variances are minor, we note that the proposed lot is sufficiently sized to accommodate the 16-unit apartment, as all the setbacks for the building are met and comply with zoning. The landscaping areas are met and comply with zoning. The refuse storage and bicycle parking are easily accommodated without impacting any setbacks between it and the building to its own property lines. The neighborhood does contain examples of similar developments on similarly sized lots configured in similar ways. The examples are provided. As the built form scale is compliant and the landscaping requirements are met, and we can still provide both bike storage and waste storage, the variances are considered minor with regards to the units. The reduced setbacks for the accessory structure do not impact the maintenance of the structure. The material choice and alternative construction methods do result in a lesser setback being appropriate and resulting in greater efficiency for the use of the rear yard. Due to the subject site's location and proximity to transit and cycling infrastructure, a reduction in parking from 2 spaces to 0 is minor, as the residents have sufficient access to bicycle parking and easy access to transit. Next slide, please. With regards to whether the variances meet the intent and purpose of the official plan, we note that the intent and purpose is to provide a range of dwelling types, choices, promoting infill net transit, ensuring compatible built form, and supporting more active modes of transportation. Mix of dwelling types supported in the interurban transect with an evolving overlay. We're consistent with the urban pattern of built form. It remains low-rise. It's a compatible intensification, prioritizes active modes of transportation. And as I said, the built form is compliant. Next slide, please. Whether the variances meet the intent and purpose of the bylaw. The proposed 16 units are accommodated with one-to-one bike parking. They don't impact the provision of landscaping or built form setbacks. The intent of the bylaw is met in this consideration. The intent of parking is to ensure that residents of the building have a space for means of transportation, and due to the site's location, this can be accommodated by proximity to transit and the provision of bicycle parking. The intent of the accessory structure is to allow for access for maintenance purposes. We note that advanced construction materials and methods no longer necessitate access for maintenance, and due to the materiality having a 40-year lifespan, that intent is met. Next slide, please. I'll be done shortly, I promise. So the development with the variances is considered suitable and desirable to support the need for housing in a manner that's compatible and massing compliant, which strongly supports policies and direction in the official plan and provincial direction on support for housing. The increase in units is possible without changing the permitted built form, and it's possible without compromising required landscaping. Accessibility is provided in a manner that's screened, and the removal of 2 parking spaces conforms to policy direction. Next slide, please. So we've gone through the municipal comments. We note that there's no concerns with the parking variance or the accessory structure variances, and the concerns relate to the specific variance to increase from 12 to 16 units. So I have gone through and provided a response to staff comments on the next slide. And this will be sort of my last point before I close it off. So it's noted that the building size and position is fully zoning compliant. So whether we reduce to 12 or 16, that remains the same. And there's no zoning regulations to either relocate the ramp and outside or inside. If we move it inside, in one way or another, we're taking away from unit space. And given the priorities for policy direction, that's not a desired approach. All of the other elements are in compliance. An accessibility consultant was contacted and reviewed the site plan and identified that a ramp is preferable over a lift. We have provided that letter to Committee of Adjustment. The distance between the balconies at the back and the accessory structure that's being used for waste and recycling is 2.4 meters. We note that a zoning compliant distance between an accessory structure and a balcony on an abutting lot, like if we were considering 2 separate lots against each other, you would have your 0.6 meters between the accessory structure and the property line, and then 1 meter to be zoning compliant because balconies can project to within 1 meter. So ultimately you could have a situation where it would be 1.6 meters between 2 lots, and this is providing 2.4 meters. So in terms of the distance between the 2 elements, they're fully compliant. And we are noting, my client is an experienced property manager. They're planning to cool the garbage enclosure, have it be fully enclosed, cooled in the summer, odor controlled, very, very well taken care of and managed on site. And screening for those balconies is going to be optional. And we want to allow that as an option simply because people are going to be going around the back to chat with their neighbors, get their bike. We want to allow the opportunity that they can have engagement with their residents moving into the backyard if they want to, but if they want to put a screen up, they have that option. So that concludes my presentation, but I am happy to address questions, and we do have the landscape plan as well in my presentation.
All right, thank you for that overview, and thank you for the slide that actually addresses staff's comments. I am going to open it up then to the panel members for questions. Anyone want to ask any questions on this? Yes, member Hunter.
Yeah, thank you. To planning staff, does the response made to planning's concerns satisfy planning?
Thank you for the question. Through you, Madam Chair. The response given, staff discussed with the applicant, I believe it was last week, and we still decided to raise some concerns as it's not the most ideal scenario, but I believe if those measures were taken, we could add notes to this site plan during the site plan control process to ensure that the accessory structure is built that way, and we would approve it with a landscape plan that would ensure that the ramp is fully screened through landscaping.
Okay, so that's taken care of. That's taken care of then at this stage.
Through the site plan control stage, we can add the tying to the landscape plan and adding notes on the site plan.
Thank you.
All right, questions from any other panel members? Member Bladerick.
And this question is for Ms. Linker. And Ms. Linker, I'm just curious, why is there a 12-unit maximum for apartment buildings in the R4UB zone?
Thank you for the question. Through you, Madam Chair. I believe that the intent of this was that there's a range of R4 zones through a study that was done, and it's R4UA through R4UD, and R4UD is the most permissive R4 zone, whereas R4UA is the most restrictive R4 zone. So this one kind of lies in the middle, and I think that it depends on what kind of neighborhood it's in and the general increase of density that was expected at that time. However, through the new official plan, we are anticipating greater amounts of intensification that will be reflected in the new zoning bylaw.
All right, thank you. And as a follow-up, Ms. Linker, the site servicing studies that are going to be requested for this development will look at the impact of 16 new households on the water supply, on the stormwater system, and on the sanitary sewer system.
Thank you for the question. Through the site plan control process, I'm just checking to see if that was requested.
It was.
Yes, the site servicing study was requested, and they will be submitting that through the phase 3 pre-consult and their formal submission.
And that'll be that site servicing study for 16 units and not 12.
Thank you for the question. If that's what's approved through the minor variance, that's what they will be submitting it on.
Thank you, Ms. Linker. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Member Bowles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess for the applicants, the exterior ramp is the sole access to the accessible unit. It's one accessible unit and that's their access.
I'll refer to the property owner. How many accessible units are you proposing?
I believe there's 3 on the main.
There's 3.
So
And
that
that's
ramp
the-
leads to an entrance and
correct.
that serves those 3.
That's correct.
What's the length of that ramp?
I don't know the full length, but we can pull it up on the site plan. It comes off of the main, if you want to slide 20, shows it quite clearly, as well as the landscaping. We want to pull it back up. But it extends about halfway down the building.
Okay, while we're waiting for that, is it covered or open
No.
to?
No, it's not.
So what are the plans for keeping that?
So we would have extensive maintenance in the wintertime to make sure that the snow is cleared on a regular basis, salted. We'd have a company that would come weekly, basically, during the wintertime. Keep that free and clear.
The difference between, of course, an interior and an exterior ramp is once you're inside the building, you don't have to worry about that. And so, either a covered lift or a small ramp in the front wouldn't be as difficult. So I couldn't see that being an issue of functionality, caused by having to exteriorize the ramp. And a follow-up is, how do those people get to the rear yard where the garbage is? Is that ramp also, it looks like steps there rather than a ramp? Unless I'm reading that wrong. Does it come back down?
No, so in order to access the rear yard, there's a walkway on the north side.
So they would have to go all the way around.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I guess if I may follow up, Madam Chair,
Absolutely.
that for Ms. Linker, same questions really. Are those issues that planning foresees as potentially causing functionality problems on the site?
Thank you for your question. I don't believe that there's any requirements under the accessibility requirements for this exterior ramp to be covered. Staff would not like to see a projection of an awning over top of the ramp. And I guess that's another reason why an internalized accessible entrance would be preferred from staff's view. I hope that answers your question.
All right, any other questions from panel members? All right, I have one for you, Ms. McQuaid. So we didn't get any concerns sent to us, but can you just, for the record, outline what your public consultation or neighbor consultation was on this?
So both, through you, Madam Chair, both myself and the applicant or the client did speak with the two abutting neighbors. We also had a number of phone conversations with Tim Gray, who is in support of the application, and had meetings with the Westboro Community Association to specifically discuss it. He did mention that he was going to speak in support of the application today, but I don't know if he's available online or not. And with regards to the accessibility component, because we were aware of staff's comment, we did approach an accessibility consultant to specifically review the site plan, and we did provide that letter to Committee of Adjustment.
All right, thank you for that. Okay, and you did raise a good point. I have no one on my speakers list, just so you know. We're going to get there in a minute. But just for the record, could you please give me your full name and your municipal address, your applicant?
Oh, David Aston, 592 Briarwood Avenue,
All right.
Ottawa.
Okay, thank you very much.
My last name's spelled Aston.
Staon.
Oh, Aston.
Okay. Glad, I'm sure committee staff got that.
Yeah, sometimes people say Ashton with an H, but it's Aston.
All right, well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. Okay, I don't see any other questions from the members here. I just want to give Ms. Linker one last opportunity. Anything else that you think the committee, any further comments you'd like to make to the committee before we go to the public portion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't believe staff have any further comments.
All right, thank you very much. I know there's a number of items that will be dealt with through the site plan control process, so fair enough. With that, then, no one on my list, so I'm going to make a general call out. Is there anyone in the audience here today or online who would like to speak to this application? Come on down. If we can start with your full name and your municipal address, please.
It's Tim Gray, TIMGRAY.
We
What-
haven't met in person.
No, we haven't. 190 West Village Private. So I guess really what I want to say today is, and I have to be fair, I have to put all this other stuff aside that has kind of been brought up today about, things that aren't specifically related to the application. But we have had discussions and, we are in support of the project. We did talk about the variances in the rear, and we did find them as minor, partially because it's a commercial property in the rear. And we may have had a bit of a different opinion if that had been a residential property, bringing it so close to the property line. But on the side yard, it's a very minor difference. I think it's, only 5 centimeters or something. So, we thought that, indeed is minor. When we discussed it, with the board, one of the things that was kind of brought up is that we're starting to get into the area where we see this as minor now, but we don't want to see 18, 20 and so on units. We're seeing this as almost the upper limit to the size of the number of units in a building. And that really, it relates back to parking. And that's the thing we hear about all the time, street parking, and is there enough parking? And how do we deal with that? It's a big concern in Westboro. It was 100%. So, but the other concern is always how do we get densification? And we're kind of balancing that. So it's really what we want to say as a community group is that, don't push your luck here. This is what we see as kind of the maximum. And another point to that is that what we see is that certain streets tend to get targeted. and because of the zoning. So we want to, you know, be clear that we don't want to see this increase, right? And as you know, 10 years ago, we would see this street as getting, you know, semi-detached all the way along. But now what we're seeing is we're seeing these more and more of these high-rise or low-rise, sorry, apartment buildings. So that is adding density, and it is adding, you know, issues with street parking. So that's really what we want to say. But all in all, we've had some really good discussions with the agent, and she's explained a lot of things to us about things that we just don't understand. And so we ask questions and we get what we feel is you know, a reasonable answer, things that we can kind of relate to and understand, okay, this is why she's doing this. So that's about it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gray, for your presentation. Any questions for Mr. Gray? Yeah, Member Hunter.
You, Madam Chair. Parking it for this building is going from 2 spaces to 0. Is that a problem for you?
That we agree with that. You know, it's not a, that is not, you know, in the past, we've had applications where it's just one space. And in this situation, it's 2 spaces. But what we don't want to see is 3 spaces and then 4 spaces. Some of the people in our world don't see it slightly differently, is they see there's an exemption of 12 units. Well, how they see it, how say they see this application is an exemption for 16 units. They don't want to see an exemption for 18 units or 20 units. They really feel that, you know, there has to be some kind of you know, a line in the sand, if you want to say it.
Thank you very much.
All right. Any other speakers? For or against? Okay. That being the case, then, Ms. McQuaid, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to just recap. And I believe I'm going to make a guess that we're reserving on this. But go ahead with the recap, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just to recap, we have gone through the variances in detail. We note that we're at least in agreement on a couple of the variances with regards to the setback reductions for the accessory structure, as well as the reduction for vehicle parking. With regards to the matter in the variance for going from 12 units to 16 units, we maintain that all of these zoning compliance items are met, all the setbacks are met, the distance between the accessory structure and the balcony in the building are met. We do have approaches to addressing those concerns through the site plan control matter, through landscaping, as well as the way the accessory structure is built and managed. And we have consulted with the neighbors. We consulted with the Westboro Community Association as well. We did consult with the counselor just to make him aware of what was happening on this particular site. And he was also noted to be in support. So we've sort of done our due diligence and reviewed the policies. And we feel that this degree of intensification is very suitable for its location, and it can be accommodated in a way that's very appropriate. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. McQuaid. Well, as I said, we're going to reserve on our decision, and you will get the written decision in due course. Thank you. Okay, we're going to go back to the order of our agenda on this. So let's go with number 1. Looking for, in terms of our agents, I think it's, let me just get my list. Mr. Alain? Come on down. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair.
So the committee has had a chance to look at this application. We're going to ask for a presentation. So have you submitted a presentation to staff?
I have, thank you. The coordinator can pull it up.
All right. So with that, then we'll give you the floor.
Thank you very much. So my name is Scott Alain. I'm a senior planner at Photon Consultants, address 396 Cooper Street. The project before you today, as noted, is 255 McKay Street. If I could get the next slide, please. So this is just an aerial photograph, of course, laying out the general location of the site. It has dual frontages, a frontage on Mackay Street, which is obviously the primary frontage, and a frontage on Avon Lane, which is an active laneway that is maintained by the city of Ottawa. To the east, you have Mackay United, sorry, I should be saying Mackay United Church. It is a registered heritage building individually designated. To the south, you have the dance school, the New Edinburgh Dance School, which is also individually designated. The area as a whole, which we'll get into, is subject to a Heritage Conservation District designation, which is also applicable to the property. What we're proposing today is a severance, and I'll get into the implications of that severance in the following slides. But while we're on this slide, I want to point out kind of the prevailing character of Avon Lane, which includes various lots that have been converted to residential fronting uses. You'll see that throughout the area as well. Next slide, please. So these are the two frontages. On the left, you will see the frontage onto Mackay. I took these photos on garbage day, so I apologize for that. So you'll see a large mature tree in the front yard that kind of dominates the street frontage. The building is known in the community as the Manse. I believe it was formerly owned by the church, built in 1901. And currently it serves as an apartment building with 4 units. On the right-hand side, you'll see the rear yard, which is proposed for the severance. It is currently occupied by a garage, a very small kind of aging garage, and a addition to the building. You'll see deeper in the lot, the building addition. It is not part of the original heritage component, let's say, of the Manse building. Also on the right-hand side, you'll see an addition to the church building. That's part of the individual designation and abuts this property pretty closely. Next slide, please. This is looking down Avon Lane if you're looking northwest of the property. Again, showing some of the character that is represented. Next slide, please. This is looking south, southeast, I guess it would be, from the property. Again, you can see the dance school on the right-hand panel, and you can see on the left the church addition, and this leads out to the side street. Next slide, please. And this is further northwest down Avon Lane, again, showing the nature of the laneway. Next slide, please. This is the proposed consent. Retained is Lot A and severed is Lot B, shown there below, fronting onto Avon Lane. As part of this proposal, the addition that I had referred to, the mudroom I've called it, is proposed for demolition. And the shed / garage is also proposed for demolition. I want to note at this point that the report notes a heritage permit application will be required in order to move forward with these alterations to the heritage building. And I'll get into that in a moment. Perhaps maybe it'll come out of questions, but I should really go through the 4 tests. So if I could get to the next slide, please. So the 2 variances sought are for the rear yard condition. So the first one is a reduced yard setback. We're asking for 2.84 where 8.59 is requested. And the other is for area where we're asking for 49.5 where 150 is requested, or required rather. Next slide, please. We can skip this in the interest of time. Again, just showing the HCD. The Manse building is noted as a contributing heritage structure. The shed in the rear yard is not. Next slide, please. So the 4 tests, just briefly, neighborhood is the designation. It is intended for typologies ranging from small detached buildings all the way to low-rise apartment buildings. We maintain this. Next slide, please. The purpose of the zoning bylaw, the R4UD zoning permits, if I may just continue through these tests, I would appreciate that.
Absolutely. Yeah, yes. Go
Thank you.
ahead.
Great. Okay. So yeah, just moving through these tests. So the intent of the zoning bylaw is to permit a mix of residential buildings, a wide array. The intent of the rear yard setback is to allow for landscaping, amenity, and transition. The front yard of this building is substantial. As noted, it's about 13 meters deep, has a significant tree in the frontage, and really serves as the primary amenity aspect to this building. The transition is further accommodated by the narrow nature of the lots, both adjacent to the west, where you have a similar condition with a rear yard severance to create a lot along Avon Lane, and to the east, where you have an addition that is institutional in nature, low rise, and as mentioned, protected, so expected to maintain this in the future. Next slide, please. So is the proposal desirable? Yes, it meets, it presents an adequately sized lot. I'll reiterate that we're not asking for a reduced lot area or width, where this lot will be acceptable for detached or duplex residential development, should it be supported. It allows for accomplishment of the intensification goals of the provincial policy statement, of the official plan, and it's an efficient use of land. It results in an improved condition along Avon Lane. Next slide, please. Is it minor in nature? Yes. So in order to assess whether it's minor, we consider the impact of this minor variance. So we're generally consistent with the provisions of the R4UD zone. And as mentioned, future development on this severed lot, which is not being proposed at this time, would be able to accomplish the requirements of the R4UD zone. The reduction of the rear yard does not affect the overall character of the neighborhood. Again, we have an opportunity to improve what is a less than desirable laneway condition. It does not intensify any physical conditions on site. The rear yard windows that overlook this property on the existing building are bathroom windows. So in that manner, they are not public living windows and reduce the impact of that overlook. And the removal of the addition will be replaced with a walled feature, so that will also reduce the overlook. In conclusion, the 4 tests are met on this variance, and the consent is considered appropriate. In the interest of time, I won't go through the consent requirements in detail, but can if requested. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Arnett. With that, then I'm going to open the floor to any questions from our panel members. Anyone? Yes, Member Boss.
So I'm interested in the front yard setback. So it's 13.1 something meters currently. And part of the justification for allowing the small rear yard setback is the ample front yard. So I'm wondering what protects that from future development. Can you confirm that this would be tied to this particular building, the variances, and also there's a heritage overlay that you flip by, but that also has implications, I believe?
Through you, Madam Chair, that's a great question. So as noted, this is protected under the New Edinburgh Heritage Conservation District. As a result, any alterations, whether they be additions, new construction, will have to receive a heritage permit. The process for doing that is going to Built Heritage Committee, which is appointed counselors basically, who will base their opinion on a staff provided report and make a decision on any future alterations. So one thing that's worth mentioning with consideration to comments received from the community on this file is that there was a note about the maintenance of the existing building, the heritage building. So in order for this consent to be registered, a heritage permit is required to remove the mudroom. My understanding from coordination with heritage staff is that this permit application would require, firstly, it would require a detailed description of the works to take place on the manse building. And my understanding is that heritage staff, I don't know if they're available for this call, but they are prepared to request, basically catching up to maintenance on the roof, for example, of the building, et cetera. So bit of a long response to your question, but the answer in essence is that yes, with regard to the manse, any changes to that building will have to go through Heritage Committee.
Can I follow up? So the answer is based on the Heritage Act, basically. I'm familiar with that. I used to be chair of the Build Heritage Committee back when it was the Build Heritage Advisory Committee years ago. But I'm looking for zoning instruments, zoning mechanisms. So I think the heritage overlay regulates the building envelope. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, that is correct, yes. So the section 60 of the zoning bylaw refers to what's called the heritage overlay. And also there's the mature neighborhoods overlay, which is also applicable to this property. And both of those are quite restrictive in terms of what you can do in terms of changing the building frontage. And any alteration would come before this committee or through a zoning bylaw amendment. It could not be done as of right.
And if the average setback changed because of development in the adjacent lots, is there something other than the heritage overlay that still protects that 13-meter setback? Is this set of variances, for example, tied to the life of this building?
So the variances relate only and would only clear the rear yard condition. So I understand your concern, but again, through the HCD, no changes could be accomplished either before this approval, if it were to go through, or after. So that is protected under a different set of zoning and let's say policy obligations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I'll ask if the planner would address that, not now, but later in comments.
Member Mostly, sure you don't want to get staff weigh in on this?
Oh, if you want it now,
Yeah,
that would
yeah,
be
let's hear.
fine. Is the front yard protected in some way, or is it just Heritage Act?
Thank you for your question. As the agent mentions, there's the heritage overlay under section 60 that the site is subject to. And one of the provisions in that says that any building in an area to which the heritage overlay applies is removed or destroyed, it must be rebuilt with the same character at the same scale, massing, volume, floor area, and in the same location as it existed prior to its removal or destruction. So that part of the zoning bylaw covers that heritage aspect. And as well, it is a contributing property, that specific building, under the Heritage Conservation District. So it would have to go through a lot of process in order to be removed and rebuilt.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Members? Okay. Just want to confirm then, there's no proposal for the lot to be severed at this point. Just want to make sure.
So to clarify, the proposal before you is to sever the lot. No development is contemplated at this point. So what we've proposed here is the establishment of a lot that can meet the R4UD requirements for lot area, frontage, and the applicant's intent is to then sell the lot to a constructor there, not a land developer by practice. So we're dealing with the severance, and as mentioned, the alterations, including the removal of that rear mudroom, will require further process where we apply for a heritage permit in order to grant that change to the existing building.
All right, thank you for that. Moving on then to the conditions. You've had a chance to go through the list?
Yes, I have.
And any concerns with any of the conditions?
No concerns. I sought clarification on the requirement for tree planting in the frontage of each created lot, basically saying that a tree has to be placed between the right of way and the building, essentially to animate the public realm. And upon further clarification from forestry, that condition is acceptable. So yes.
All right, thank you. With that, then, if there's no other questions, based on my speakers list, I do have one neighbor that's on my list, Jean-Christophe Amado. Do we have our presenter online?
Not seeing them online, Madam Chair.
All right. Well, with that then, I'll make one last call at the end of this, but is there anyone else then in the audience or online who would like to speak to this application? Yes, come on down. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Just going to need to start with your name. and your
Yes,
municipal
my name
address.
is Gail McEachran. Gail is spelled Gail. McEachran is spelled Mceachern.
All right, thank you. The floor is yours.
What?
You can go ahead with
Oh,
your
I can go ahead.
presentation.
Okay,
then.
great. Yeah. So I am the chair of the Heritage and Development Committee of the New Edinburgh Community Alliance. This is a committee which has been in existence for about since 2001 when we formed the Heritage Conservation District. So this is the statement on behalf of the New Edinburgh Community Alliance. The Heritage and Development Committee of the New Edinburgh Community Alliance has reviewed the Heritage Planning Branch staff comments and the planning rationale report prepared by FO10 consultants in support of the consent and minor variance applications to sever the property at 255 Mackay in order to create a new lot fronting onto Avon Lane. Although New Edinburgh's Heritage Conservation Plan prohibits severance of through lots from Mackay, Stanley, and Creighton Streets in order to create new lots on the lanes, the committee acknowledges that this particular section of Avon Lane is a visual anomaly dominated by undistinguished institutional style architecture and could be greatly enhanced by allowing for residential development should the severance be permitted. NECA endorses the request of the owner of 255 Mackay to have the application for severance approved by the Committee of Adjustment, contingent upon the following. One, that no new parking spaces will be created in front of 255 Mackay to replace the parking spot which will be lost due to the severance. And the second issue is approval of the severance is clearly specific to this site and does not apply to the remaining through lots.
Thank you. Does that complete your comments?
Yes.
Oh, all right. Thank you. Good. In fact, you raised some very interesting points. So I'm going to go over to Mr. Alain and look for some answers on that. So with the loss, Ms. McEachran, you can stay. There may be other
Okay.
questions for you. So,
All right. Okay.
So we're just going to get clarification, and then I'm going to see whether or not any of the other panel members have questions for you.
Okay.
So Mr. Alain, on the loss of that parking space, what's the plan?
Great. Thank you for your question, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. McEachran, for your presentation. We met with Ms. McEachran and some of the other members of the community on October 10th, which seems like a long time ago, or October 6th rather, which seems like a long time ago now, but to go over some of these things and ensure that there's comfort with the deviation we're making from the HCD, which I'm glad to hear. So I'm going to touch on both points. I'll start with the well, I guess they're related. So yes, we are removing the parking on the severed lot. This is area X of the parking zoning requirements, which means that no parking spaces are required for the first 12 units of a residential building. So no parking is required for the manse, and no parking is required for a new development on the severed property. So if it gives comfort to Ms. McEachran, and I believe staff would probably agree with me, and you'd be welcome to ask them, but several variances would be required given all of the policy, zoning, et cetera, framework we just explained for the front yard. It would be very difficult to establish a front yard parking space here, and certainly not something that I would agree to represent. So in terms of whether it could be done, the answer in my opinion is no. it couldn't be done as of right. I can tell you that for sure. Whether it could be done even through applications, I don't think it would get the necessary support. And then in terms of the reduction of parking, again, what will happen on that severed lot, I can't forecast. It's being sold to a builder. If they require variances, they will come again before this committee. I expect they'll act within the market of what is seen in terms of what their client would be interested in building. But yes, I can confirm that for the 4 units on site at the Manse, they will lose their parking space and no new parking is proposed.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Mr. Arling, for that. Just visually though, you showed some photographs in your presentation of Avon Lane. And I saw, you know, those townhouses that are fronting on it. Is there any new parking attached to those? Like I didn't see any new parking as a result of that. So just give me an overview of what Avon Lane looks like.
Sure. So there's a variety of let's say solutions. So you'll see if you go down Avon Lane and in fact other laneways throughout New Edinburgh and in fact other laneways throughout the city, you'll see a varying composition. In terms of what you often see if it's a single detached dwelling is they'll usually have a garage, which they would be permitted to do so in the zoning, but there are various provisions which are fairly substantive that would basically reduce it in size or make it subservient to the remainder of the building, et cetera. So to answer your question, along Avon Lane, you do encounter garages both as part of houses that front off the laneway and as part of infill development. You also see things like you had highlighted where there's no parking proposed. I'm supportive of the direction, both in official plan policy and in the zoning, which serves to reduce parking in areas that are well served by transit and active transportation. So again, the character is eclectic. That's the nature of laneways. My home has a laneway and it's a variety of things. What I will say is that the components to my laneway that are occupied by infill development are a lot more comfortable and safe feeling than the aspects that are garages and rear yards. So.
All right, thank you, Mr. Alain, for that. Okay, any questions from panel members to Ms. McEachran? No? Thank you, Ms. McEachran, for your time today.
You're welcome.
Anyone else then, either in the audience here or online who would like to speak to this application? Okay, not seeing anybody come forward. All right. With that then, Mr. Alain, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to recap.
I'm comfortable with what's been said to date, so I will leave it there in the interest of your time. If you have any further questions, though, I'm happy to touch on anything that needs further clarity. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. I think we're going to reserve on this one. So thank you for your time, and you will get the decision in due course, as you know. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, on to number 2. So we're looking at 112 Queen Elizabeth and 8 McLeod, looking for Mr. Duckworth. Do we have Mr. Duckworth? We have. No. Yes, we'll get your name and your municipal address, and you can explain that to us when. Well, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Adams. I work with Hoban Architecture.
Sorry, your last name again?
Jennifer Adams.
Adams. Okay, thank you. I don't think we need a presentation from you on this application. I'm going to open it up directly to questions from the committee. Anyone? Member Blatherwick, were you suggesting you had any questions?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
All right, just bear with me. I don't think we have any kind of housekeeping amendments to do.
Madam Chair, I just wanted the thing that I asked before. Just to confirm that the variances were granted last time are still in effect for things like rear yard. That's all taken care of, correct?
Correct.
That's it.
Okay. Guess the other thing we've noticed is we do have some revised condition, I guess pursuant to recent discussions. So Ms. Adams, have you had a chance to review those and are you okay with them?
Were you referring to comments number 4 and 5 in the conditions?
Right, might be looking for Ms. Linker to help me out here, but I'm seeing a revised report with some like under 2, I have a new B that looks like. I have the removal or deletion of C and D. And then no other changes from the original, oh, sorry. And then we have a new 8, 9, and 10. I believe that's pursuant to some comments that were received from the National Capital Commission. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. That's correct. And my apologies for the late report on that.
All right, so back to you, Ms. Adams. Have you had a chance to see that?
When was that report sent? Sorry, this morning? Okay, the one that I have has up to 7, but
All right, so just a question to committee staff. Do we have a set of revised conditions that perhaps Ms. Adams can follow along with?
Yes, Madam Chair.
And Ms. Linker, once Ms. Adams has that revised report in hand, I'm going to ask you just to walk us through those changes so that we know what we're dealing with.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Condition 2 was with respect to the heritage designation surrounding this property, and the original C or B and C conditions that are now C and D in the updated report. We decided, although they were on the previous staff recommended conditions in the 2021 version of this consent, that perhaps they didn't appear to be it seemed difficult to clear them, and we decided to write a new condition that just spoke to the pre-blast survey or the pre-construction survey to ensure that the houses surrounding the lots would be identified and reviewed prior to this severance to ensure that everything's taken care of from that end, and then anything following that would have to follow the city standards through F 1201. So we removed those 2 as those are standards that would be better sought through the revised condition. Conditions 8, 9, and 10 are forestry conditions. Number 8, we wrote in conjunction with the recommendation from the NCC. And condition 9, my colleague Nancy Young can likely speak better to this, but I believe condition 9 is to provide a grading plan, just demonstrating that all structures that will be on the site as proposed and how those will impact the trees that exist today, as well as the trees that propose to be planted, as well as a tree planting plan that can be submitted.
All right, thank you. I think Ms. Young, are you there? I'd like to just ask you a clarification question on number 9.
Okay, yes, I'm here.
Yes, good afternoon, Ms. Young.
Good afternoon.
So I'm looking at number 9 and it talks about a grading and drainage or a grading plan. And so we've seen these before in terms of a requirement for a grading plan. Of course, it's, to be approved through general manager, the normal wording. You're saying that based on a least impact to distinctive trees and tree cover. So is this, I just want to make sure that we are tailoring this to exactly what the tree needs are, as opposed to more generic condition that is for grading and drainage. So can you just explain to me how, what the distinction is, I guess, between the 2 of them to make sure we're not being repetitive?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't read the grading and drainage one. Mostly what this one is seeking is to make sure that all the plans developed for the site, once they are developed, that they match. And what we're saying is it should be based on the input from the tree information report. So saying where the existing trees are and then ensuring that the grading plans and I mean, I didn't say the site plan here, but essentially any plans for the house here will account for tree retention as shown so far in the tree information report. So it is kind of a general one. It's pretty much to see that there won't be any major changes from this that would affect tree retention.
All right, so I'm looking at number 7 is the grading and drainage condition versus 9, which talks about a grading plan. So all I'm looking for from you then, Ms. Young, is confirmation that that this is in fact 2 different conditions that need to be cleared. The other option, of course, would be to simply add your requirement to condition number 7. Had you looked at it? Like, did you?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't read through it in detail, but generally they are considered separate. The grading one is more to ensure that the grading and that the house can be serviced or can be graded on its own as a severed lot. And then condition 9 that I've put on is just that the grading plan, whatever that is, needs to abide by the TIR essentially. So they are similar, they are very much tied together, but they do reflect different things.
All right, thank you. I think I understand then sort of the nuance to this one with regards to, okay, so they are tied, so you don't undertake them separately, you undertake them together. You just need to clear the other condition to prove that you've actually taken that tree information report into consideration, correct?
Exactly, that's a much better description.
All right, okay. Back to you then, Ms. Adams. Have you had a chance to just absorb that and the changes and any comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I don't see any issue with these conditions, and we're comfortable to say that we agree to all of them.
All right, thank you then. Okay, so with that, remind me, did we do the public portion yet on this one? Don't think so. All right, just looking, because sometimes you get into discussion and you kind of lose track of where you were in the whole matter. So, okay, before I go to the public side, though, I just want to make sure there isn't any further questions from our panel members on anything that we've talked about up to now. And if there isn't, then we will go to the speakers list. On item number 2, I have no one on my list. So is there anyone either here today or in person or online who would like to speak to this application? Okay, not seeing anybody. Ms. Adams, giving you 2 minutes to recap.
Thank you. I will leave it at that. We've got a servicing plan, a grading plan and everything already prepared. We're working with engineers and we are working with an arborist as well, who takes the same stance as the NCC with regard to retaining the root systems around those 2 large trees. So I think everybody's on the same page. Thank you.
All right, so I'm looking for guidance from our panel. Are we comfortable making a decision at this point?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so all those in favor? Then for the record, the application is unanimously granted. Thank you very much, Ms. Adams, for your attendance today. All right, bye now. Okay, we're going to go to number 3 for 72 Armstrong. I believe member Boss needs to, yes, that'd be fine. That'd be fine. So on number 3, we're looking for Agent Chilton Jones. Do we have the agent for 72 Armstrong?
We do, Madam Chair. I believe the agent is connecting.
All right, thank you. We'll give that a moment.
Good day, Madam Chair. I'm the agent. I'm just waiting for my colleague Amanda to be connected. She will be presenting on behalf of us.
All right, I don't think we will need a full presentation, but just for questions on this application. And so, all right, so I believe your colleague has joined you, Ms. Sanford?
I have, Madam Chair. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I don't have you, Ms. Sanford, on my speakers list. So for the record, could you just give your name and your municipal address, please?
Yep, my name is Amanda Sanford. My municipal address is 3-108 Bridge Street in Picton, Ontario, K0K2T0.
All right, thank you so much for that. Okay. Opening it up to questions, I believe Member Blatherwick, you may have some questions on this.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. My first question is, when was this triplex constructed?
The construction was complete in 2019, I believe.
2019. And I have we all have an order to comply. Are you aware of the order to comply?
Yes, we are.
Okay, dated the 11th of May, 2023. Has that order to comply, is it still outstanding? Has it been met?
So I believe they have complied with as much as we can. Part of the application
Which means
exactly
what, Ms. Sanford?
Sure. So my understanding is that there's a lot of compliance required for the front yard landscaping, as there was kind of an illegally established parking, as well as the rear yard landscaping, which wasn't complete. So we are looking to complete this application, which does address both the front and rear yard landscaping, ensuring that we have adequate room for soft space as well as plantings. And, you know, upon approval of this minor variance application, we will be proceeding with those requirements.
Ms. Sanford, you're aware that the order to comply is in regards to the illegal fourth unit that was put into this building in 2022.
Right. So, okay. So that is part of it as well. I do understand that. That requires a conversion of use from a triplex to a fourplex. And in this case, we have an abundance of space in the basement. So we're going to utilize that to create 5 units instead of 4.
So that fourth unit in the basement of this dwelling is currently occupied?
No, it's not occupied, but it is still existing.
And how long has that remained unoccupied?
For at least the past year, as we've worked through this application and the pre-consultation and the engineering requirements for it.
All right. Because I was very concerned that somebody's in that basement apartment and you don't have approval from a building, from not a building permit, but a building code and fire code perspective. So that unit is vacant.
Correct.
And the 5th unit is going to go where the 4th unit is currently? There'll be 2.
The 4th unit is going to remain as is because it is suitable for a unit. But the basement was part of the upstairs unit, which was 4 bedrooms in total. So we had 3 bedrooms in the basement. We're going to convert that to a 2-bedroom unit so that there's going to be 5 units in total in that building.
All right. And do we have elevations that show us where the access egress for that extra unit are going to be?
We have provided them for you. And basically we're keeping the building envelope the same. So there's a door at the back, which we're going to be using to sort of separate into the 5th unit. And it's going to have its own independent entrance, as does the 4th.
So Ms. Sanford, do you have, you submitted a slide deck to the committee?
Yes, I have, although there is floor plans. I don't believe that there's an elevation included in the presentation material.
Member Blatherwick, would it help for discussion purposes to have the floor plans?
Yes, Madam Chair, it certainly would. I don't think I can make a decision until I see those elevations.
I think we're being offered floor plans, not elevations. Would that help?
It would help. Yeah.
All right. So Ms. Sanford, can you direct our committee staff to what number slide that might be on?
Yes, please. Slide number 3.
All right, thank you. Can you walk us through this one then? Exactly what level it's at and where those units are?
Yes, so this is the main floor plan. So on the left-hand side, you have the existing main floor plan. In the existing living room, there is a door that leads out to a deck. That door is going to be converted, as you can see on the right-hand side, into the new exit, which is going to be separated from the deck. And that's going to lead directly down into the basement, into the 5th unit, which you could get a better understanding of on slide number 2, if you want to see the basement floor plan. So as you can see, we enter down, the 4th illegal unit that you're referring to is still there in its place. But on the upper side of that plan is a new 2-bedroom unit, making use of the space that we have excessive in the building.
So on the left is existing, on the right is proposed. Am I following that?
Correct.
Member Blatherwick, any questions, follow-on questions here?
No, that's sufficient for me at this time, Madam Chair. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Sanford, for that. It's helpful. Any other questions from our panel members on this application? All right, I'm not seeing any further questions. So going to my speakers list. I don't believe we have anybody else. Either Ms. Sanford or Ms. Chilton Jones, can you confirm to me who Lynette Mitchell is? Is that someone who's part of the application?
She's a colleague in the office that we added to the list, but she's just attending via YouTube. So the applicant saw the client and Amanda and myself.
All right, thank you so much. In that case, I don't have any speakers, so I'm going to make a general call out. Anyone in the audience here today or online who would like to speak to this application? All right, not seeing any, so chance for a recap here, either Ms. Chilton Jones or Ms. Sanford.
Sure. So just to recap the application, we are looking to convert an existing triplex into a 5-unit. And to do so, we need a total of 5 minor variances, including the front yard or the rear yard setback, the side yard setbacks, the building height, the front facade, as well as a permission for the rear yard parking, which is existing, but is not generally permitted on lots less than 450 meters squared.
All right, thank you. With that, then I think we may be ready for a vote on this. Member Keklikan? Yeah, all right. So all those in favor? Okay, so I am voting in favor, and I believe we have a member Blatherwick who is not, correct? Member
That's correct,
Blatherwick?
Madam Chair. That's correct.
All right. The application is nonetheless granted, ladies, so you will get, well, it is granted and you'll get the written decision in 10 days' time. All right?
Yes. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Okay, we can get member Baltz back to, oh, here's our, beat me to it. And we're going to application number 4. So I believe member Keklikan is going to need to recuse himself from this one. Okay, so we're on to 4, which is for 53 Sweetland. I believe I'm looking for Mr. Thompson as the agent.
Hello, I'm.
Oh, it's Ms. Thompson. My apologies. I read that wrong. I read that John Thompson somehow. It's Jane, so my apologies. Okay, so we are not requesting a presentation from you. I am going to open it up for questions because, well, actually, before I go there, Ms. Thompson, my understanding is that there has been some discussions with regards to the screening of the, I guess, the walls, and that apparently there's been an agreement that it would be transparent, but that agreement is not reflected in the existing plans that we have today.
There have been discussions between the owner and the neighbor at 51 Sweetland. There hasn't, going back and forth, there was suggestion that that was one possibility. There hasn't been agreement reached, and I believe our understanding is that the neighbor still would like to have a wall at the edge of the building. So he hasn't confirmed whether transparent glazing would be beneficial or not. We have asked for variances for transparent glazing at other locations on the same face of the wall. So we do have a variance already in place for transparent glazing in general. If we went back and forth a few times with the neighbor and haven't yet come to a conclusion. We have on many other issues, but that was one that was still up in the air.
All right, so Ms. Thompson, as you know, we generally tie our approvals to plans. So we tend to like to have, I guess, the most accurate of plans that we're approving. So not sure how to deal with this one then. You said, well, that there hasn't been any agreement with that neighbor at all at this point. I'm not sure how to deal with that, to be honest with you. All right. We're going to open up to questions. We'll have to come back to that one, perhaps through the consultation period. We'll get some clarification as to what the concerns are about exactly. Okay. Any questions for Ms. Thompson then at this point? Yes, Member Baltz.
So, Ms. Thompson, I found the description of where exactly these barriers on walls are to be pretty confusing. So if possible, can you take us through where the ones in question are sited? Also, there's on a roof deck, there is what appears to be what is labeled as a landscaped area, and then some sort of outside perimeter area. And where are the barriers with respect to the outer edge, and then the barrier between the grass, the green and the not green?
Thank you. I'd be happy to answer that. If we could go to slide number 3 in the variance presentation, that will help. While we're waiting. Okay, so let me start. If you look at unit 3, existing 2-story portion, there's a green fill on top of that area, and that is the courtyard at grade. Then if you look at, there's the proposed 1-story addition with roof deck, and it has arrows to the corner of the building, and you can see heavy double lines at the top, right, and bottom faces of those, which is where we would propose to put 1.5 meter high solid walls. So that would be a continuation of the building wall extending 1.5 meters beyond the roof surface. Adjacent to those 2 walls at the top and right, we're showing labeled as 1.5 meters, a landscaped gardening strip that would be on the deck. And then we have also requested to have transparent guards on some other locations. And though there's a variance for those where they face the side yard of the neighbor. And so there's a small existing balcony that has transparent railing on it that would remain. And then the railing just above the note unit 3 would also be transparent. And the reason we're doing it there is because it's compared to the other walls is that it's set well back from the property. And while I'm discussing that, just to answer the earlier question about the drawings and the guard facing the neighbor, we have included some sun studies that we think address the neighbor's concern about sun and don't show that there would be a significant difference by going with the transparent guard. So we would prefer to remain with the drawings as presented. But as I'd said, are welcome to continue talking with the neighbor if necessary. I do also have some elevations that we could flip to if that would also be helpful and answer the question. That would be a couple more slides. Yeah, down one more. So that again shows the railings, and you can see at this larger scale, the ones with the gray fill would be solid. The ones with the lighter double lines would be transparent. And then in this case, you can see the green shading on the landscaping that's on the roof to differentiate that from the ones at grade. And if you go, I believe it's the next slide. Yeah, so this is the appearance from 51 Sweetland. So you would see the solid guard at the edge, and then the transparent guard where the building is further set back, and the existing transparent guard where at the balcony connecting to the existing house. And next slide would show solid guard on the other side facing 55 Sweetland. And then the last one shows the appearance from, there's one more slide. Oh, no, this is the different presentation that addresses the shading, the guard. There should have been one more slide in this deck. But, I don't know where that's happened, where that's gone. And this is a separate presentation, which would be in response to the neighbors' comments about sun, which I'm happy to go through now if it would be helpful, or leave it at that.
So in the question of tying it to plans or not, there's no proposal to move any of these barriers, correct? In the discussions with the neighbor, it's just the materiality?
If you look at, the neighbor had also requested that it be moved back. And so on the sun study, we have shown there's neighbor requested guard setback, you can see in the 1.5 meters. So I believe the neighbor would like it back 1.5 meters and solid. Under the zoning bylaw, once it's moved 1.5 meters back, there's no requirement for it to be solid. So there's a couple different options there, but our preference would be to proceed with the plans as you see at the committee.
But you wouldn't, if you moved it back, there would not be a different variance needed.
No, that would eliminate the
That
variance.
would comply, so that variance would be gone.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions for Ms. Thompson? Ms. Linker, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, I was unaware of the discussion surrounding the option of a transparent screen. I just wanted to clarify that staff reviewed the plans as submitted to the committee and would not be supportive of transparent screens in place of the walls where they exist today, or sorry, in place of the opaque screens where they exist on the proposed plans. And I believe that would call for another variance or a revised variance to speak to the entire rooftop terrace being transparent screening rather than just the specific area that they've shown on the plans. So staff would not be supportive of that if that was requested, and don't believe that could be heard today.
Yeah, it does sound, Ms. Linker, like it's a longer discussion if we get into that. All right. So noted. Okay. Any other questions then on this? Member Blatherwick.
For Ms. Linker, Ms. Linker, reviewing the materials that we are presented, I note that we have a plan of survey from 1976 that does not reflect what's on the ground right now at 53 Sweetland. So I would submit to you that plan of survey is out of date and inaccurate. However, I also understand that the two-story addition at the rear of this property is going to be demolished in advance of the new addition being constructed. So my question is to the department: is the department comfortable with a site plan from 1976, given what's on the ground now and what is being proposed to be built at 53 Sweetland?
Thank you for the question. Through you, Madam Chair, I believe that the committee received an updated survey from 2015 for the subject site. It was stamped April 9th, 2024.
Okay. No, I don't.
Member Blatherwick, did you have a chance to?
I
to look
haven't,
at
I
that?
haven't seen that. I may have missed that. So Ms. Linker, that survey is accurate?
Thank you for the question. It's my understanding that it's accurate. Perhaps the applicant could further
Okay.
elaborate on that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Linker. And Madam Chair, I think we need to make a slight correction in the notice of hearing. Under variance D, we have permitted reduced rear yard area 1.6.3% of the lot area or 5 meters. That should be 5 meters squared. Whereas the bylaw
All right,
requires.
sorry, let me catch up to you there, Mr. Member Blatherwick. So sorry, under D, you were saying?
Yeah, it's just that it's 1.6.3% of the lot area or 5 meters. That's length, not area. So that probably should be 5 meters. I'm assuming 5 meters squared. And the second part of that is whereas the bylaw requires 25% or 76.59 square meters. Just to
Okay.
make that a little more accurate.
That's a good catch. We missed it. So Ms. Thompson, looking for your just confirmation on that change for notice requirements?
Yeah.
Yes, that should be meters squared.
Yeah.
Perfect. So thanks for that to Member Blatherwick. It's always good to have accurate descriptions. Okay. Any further questions from our members? Don't believe so. All right, moving on to then a speakers list on this one. I have no one that's to speak to the committee. I do have other names, which are the owners, I believe. Anyone in the audience or online would like to speak to the committee about this application at 53 Sweetland for a number of variances? Yes. So Mr. Silbert.
Hi, I'm the neighbor at 51 Sweetland.
Sorry, can you just repeat your municipal address, please?
I'm the owner of 51 Sweetland, the adjacent property to the north.
All right, so you have 5 minutes. Go ahead.
I don't really have a presentation or anything like that. I just do want to say that we do generally support the application. The talking back and forth with the neighbor is me, so I've been the one corresponding with them. I think I'll correct a couple things. So the survey was actually a survey from my property. I was here in front of Committee of Adjustments back in 2016, 2015 for a variance for my building. So the survey that was submitted was actually for my property, but because of the adjacency to the property to the south, it has some things such as the location of the garage and stuff like that. So I think the survey that was referred to from 2016 is actually mine, unless there's a newer one. I don't think so. But I think that's the one that I forwarded onto the committee as part of my feedback comments to the application. So just to clarify what I'm looking for, I had some emails with the applicant requesting, basically it's really a 1-story garage at the back right now with a rooftop patio on top of that garage, although there's a wall that goes, up about 8 feet above the roof line of the garage. So, what we currently have in the backyard is sort of this big, massive, great wall, and we're looking to improve that condition. We support them turning the garage, essentially rebuilding it as a unit. It doesn't really change much from our thing. We're just looking to have greater sunlight and openness to the backyard instead of having this large wall. So essentially what we're asking is that they don't provide a wall that extends beyond the roof line, and that they just simply have the setback for the railing at 1.5 meters as the bylaw requires. Alternatively, he was saying he'd like to keep that railing, and then we just like it as glass, just to provide a lighter feel to it. So at least we don't feel like they have this huge wall in our backyard for the small backyard space that's for the tenants back there. So that's what we're looking for, is that line along the north at the very back addition. And then our only other concern, which we'd sent in this morning, is just around garbage storage. So I don't note on the site plan anywhere for garbage storage. I had spoken with the owner this morning. He indicated that the garbage storage is done at the front of the building behind a fence, an area that's indicated as softscaping up there. I'm not sure. Must have been a mistake on the application. It's indicated as softscaping area, but it's just sort of an outdoor storage area in the front yard, which doesn't apply to doesn't conform with the bylaws. not a zoning bylaw per se, but a property standards bylaw that's specific to Sandy Hill. It says garbage has to be in the rear. If there's no space in the rear, in the side yard, if no space in the side yard, then it could be in the front yard. So I'll note in this case, there's no rear yard, but the side yard would be a place they could find it. So I just think the applicant should find a place for at least secured storage. We have a lot of issues with animals in the neighborhood. Open garbage cans tend to lead to rats, and we have had issues in the area. So I know if the community association was here, I don't know if they've come to this, but that's always their thing. It's garbage, bike storage, things like that from the San Diego Community Association. I used to sit on it for many years, so I know that's always their stick on the issues with these committees things. So I'm just looking for the applicant to provide a permanent garbage storage solution, sort of enclosed. Again, that was part of my committee of adjustments hearing, was that we secured a location for garbage storage. It's located within an enclosure to prevent animal things. So we're just looking for the same thing from the applicant. Other than that, we support it. We're happy to see an improvement to this rear yard condition, and wish the applicant the best of luck in construction. We're happy to work with him going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Silbert. All right, so you've raised a couple of things that I think we do need to get clarification on. So back to the survey, Ms. Thompson, I'm going to be looking to you to provide us exactly what's what. So we thought we heard we had a 2015 up-to-date survey for the property in response to member Blatherwick's concern. Now it sounds like it may not exactly be what we thought it was. Can you please provide us with some clarification on that?
Certainly, Madam Chair. Jeremy is correct that he provided a copy of his survey, which did show the outline of our building and of the shed at the back. The surveys, we've compared them, and they're for the shed, for example, they're within a 3/4 of an inch of each other. So there is conformance, even though it's an old survey. It does have all the property boundaries and the setbacks. In addition to that, prior to any construction, we would be having a surveyor on site to pin the corners. So I think an issue is ensuring that all the building is built to all the setbacks that are approved in the variance. So that would be achieved by a surveyor coming out, pinning the corners and of the new construction. So we do have a survey that reflects the conditions accurately, even though it is old. Especially with the combination between our survey and now the neighbors, which is more recent, which do generally conform to each other. So that would be my response to the survey comment.
Okay, so I just want to circle back with Ms. Linker then, because, you know, the reason why we ask for up-to-date surveys is to ensure that the planners have the information they need to actually do a zoning compliance review that picks up anything that's actually required. So just want to make sure that Ms. Linker is comfortable that she was working with plans that were sufficient for her to do her job, essentially. Ms. Linker?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. My apologies for that mix-up there. The applicant pre-consulted with staff a few months ago, and I believe this is the survey that I reviewed at that time in alignment with their site plan, and I was comfortable reviewing this site plan or this survey.
All right, okay, so glad we got that one covered. And then back to, I guess the second point Mr. Silbert raised had to do with the whole question about transparent, opaque, how do we go? I think I heard from Ms. Linker that that's a much larger discussion, one that we probably could not resolve here today, and certainly would want to look at what those revisions and whether or not another minor variance, in fact, might be required on that. So we're not looking at making any changes unless, Ms. Thompson, that's something that you think your applicant would, or your client would like to do, and to have further discussions regarding that. What's your sense?
I think we would like to proceed with the application as is. I do have a presentation bank. We did some thorough shading analysis, looking at if the railing were set back, and we can go through that. But what we discovered was that it made virtually no difference in the shading pattern. And in any case, what we were proposing created less shade than the existing situation. So the building is further set back and the railing is lower than what currently exists. So what we're proposing is an improvement at every time of the day and every season over what the existing is. And then we compared moving the railing back or making it transparent with with what we were proposing, and it made a very minimal difference, especially when you consider that the neighbor also has a shed and a large tree, so that the shading that is caused in his property by those is much more significant. They're already shaded whether we have a building there or not. If it would be helpful, we could open up the presentation. I believe this was submitted more recently, so you may not have, as part of my presentation, it wasn't submitted with the original variance application.
No, that's fine, Ms. Thompson. Your testimony on the matter, I think, is going to be sufficient for us. I am looking, though, we heard from Mr. Silbert that there were discussions about the garbage area in the back. Had you considered changes to the design, given that there may be some issues with wildlife and rats getting into these?
We have actually had rats property now because of the vacant building. So that's our first step to removing that. We would like to comply to have an enclosed storage area, and we will provide that in the rear or side yard as part of that. We also have interior space that's available if necessary. So we will fully comply and ensure that the garbage is in a enclosed, secure location, and that there's no further garbage in the front yard.
All right, thank you, Ms. Thompson. Is any members of the panel have questions for Mr. Silbert? No? All right. Okay, that then brings us to, again, another general call out. Mr. Silbert came forward. Anyone else that would be interested in speaking to the committee? All right, I'm not seeing anybody then. In that case, Ms. Thompson, you have the final word, a couple of minutes for me to recap if you'd like.
Okay, thank you very much. We believe that we're undertaking a valuable activity by converting unused dilapidated space into an additional dwelling unit in a way that's that matches the existing situation. We've tried to very carefully address privacy and separation from the adjacent neighbors, who all have open decks that are higher than ours, looking down, and that's why we've taken the approach we have to including both a solid wall and landscaping. So that I think I'll just leave it at there. And we have had consulted with the community association, the councillor, provided information to all the neighbors and planning and heritage. So we are pleased with the generally positive response and have resolved a number of issues with the neighbor related to vines and tree protection and a number of serious neighborly issues.
Ms. Thompson, you are aware then that a heritage permit is required before you take any alterations on the property?
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to reaffirm that. Okay, I think we're ready for a vote, or unless someone would like to reserve, we can vote. All right, all those in favor? Okay, for the record, the application is unanimously granted. And with that, we'll wish you good luck with your project. Thank you. All right, I think that brings us, oh no, we have two more after this. Number 5, looking for, this is on 398, 402, and 408 Roosevelt. And the agent on this will be Mr. Yakachuk. And Mr. Budzik? No, just Mr. Yakachuk? All right. All right. You're in the wings in case help is required. Okay. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Again, on this one, I don't believe we had asked for, we had thought about a presentation for this. So I think I'm just going to open it up to questions from the committee. Anyone? Must be getting later in the afternoon. That's what I'm thinking at this point. All right, let me just, let me get through, just to make sure there's no housekeeping elements to this. All right, so minor variance application, fairly straightforward. It's for, let's see, we're looking at reduction of parking spaces. So where are you in the site planning process?
Through you, Chair. So we've thus far had a phase one pre-application consultation meeting with staff who have been generally supportive of this. However, to proceed to phase three, which is next, we need to obviously be zoning compliant. And since the zoning was established in 2018, the design contemplated for the proposed development has changed, and thus we no longer meet the parking requirement. However, we do meet all other zoning provisions.
All right, so in looking at the number of parking, so you're meeting visitor, if I understand that correctly?
That's correct.
Okay, and so you're looking at going down 10 spaces. All right, and so the site plan essentially, the draft site plan essentially reflects that, right? So you're not looking at, okay.
That's correct.
No chance for any additional parking spaces through the process?
No.
Okay, well, that's pretty much my questions. Was there anything else? Just give me a moment. I think we talked about tying any approvals to the floor plans. Would it be worth it to walk us through those?
With regard to the floor plans, no minor variances are being requested based on anything other than parking. So I'm not sure if it would necessarily be helpful, but happy to do so if you'd like to.
Well, it's interesting you should say that because my notes say to talk about that, but for whatever reason, I don't actually see why I would have written that down as a note to myself. But, okay. No, I guess that's it. So let's not worry about the floor plans. Any other questions? All right, well, if there's no other questions, we're gonna go to speakers list on this one. And I don't have anyone. Is there anyone in the audience? Yes, come on down. Mr. Crane. But we will need your name and your municipal address for the record, once again. Thank you.
It's Tim Gray, Timgray. And again, I'm still with the Westboro Community Association. So we had some very good dialogue with the developer on this one because they were concerned about, the reduction in parking and how the community would, take it. And we do that 50% parking rate is something that we do encourage. We like to see it. But with the discussion that we had, they kind of laid out their options to achieve that. And the first one was to create another story of underground parking. And they simply explained, it's costly. And it was just not in the budget. So, and the other point on that, we did talk to a few of the neighbors and, they are concerned about the amount of blasting. So actually they were in support of not having that extra, level of parking. They would much prefer not to have it. So the other option was to keep the design of the building the way it was with, they had 10 surface parking spots, on the ground floor. And we looked at that and we considered the impact that that was going to have on the rear neighbors. So we did talk to some of them. It's hard to get a hold of everybody, but the neighbors that we talked to were, really well informed on the project. And they said that, as far as they were concerned, that was going to be a major inconvenience for them because you're going to have cars going in and out through that ground. There's a ground floor drive-through and then parked in the rear. So all in all, the proposal that they've come up with is we see as kind of good for the neighbors. Although we prefer to see that something closer to 50%, but you have to weigh everything. And, you know, what we're weighing that against is getting, you know, 62 units in a, you know, what we see as a pretty darn good development. You know, in a particular area in Westboro, you know, right at transit, LRT station right down the street. So all in all, you know, we're in support of this project. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gray. Any questions from our panel members for Mr. Gray on this? Yes, Member Bonds.
So we did receive a couple of letters from, I assume, neighbors that highlighting parking problems in the area. Is the community association comfortable that this isn't going to add to the parking congestion significantly and it can be absorbed?
Well, any development, we're always seeing these comments, you know, about street parking. And that's why I say, you know, we like to try and see that 50%. And the way this development, it's right at, you know, almost right at Richmond Road. So and you know, I did discuss that with the developer, and they came back with the answer that on Roosevelt, there's no parking on one side 24/7, and then there's only 1 hour parking on the other side. And as far as the community is concerned, you know, we have lots of discussions with Jeff Leeper, our counselor, and, you know, parking, I mean, he gets a zillion calls about it. And he has this, you know, mantra, don't call me. I don't want to hear about it. You know, we're trying to increase densification. And we recognize that there are people in the community that, you know, they either don't want to live with a car or, you know, just simply can't afford a car. And also when I spoke with the developer, you know, they recognize that, and they're trying to do a development that accommodates that. So, you know, what they've said to me is that, yes, there's the parking that is going to be in the building will be reserved for those, you know, what they call, you know, family size units, the larger units. So they're not giving it to somebody with a, you know, a bachelor, you know, and so they're trying to, you know, promote, you know, a family oriented units, which is also something we really like to see in Westboro.
All right, just a quick question, follow up on that theme then, to Mr. Yakachuk. As part of your site plan process, are you required to submit a transportation plan?
Yes.
And is that transportation plan available, and has that been shared with the community association?
Not for the updated site plan, as that would be involved in the phase 3 pre-consultation process. So we haven't reached that phase of the the pre-consultation. However, sorry. Continue.
So what does that transportation plan say about the parking though? And then the impact on street parking and congestion?
I mean, I don't want to speak to it too in-depthly. I'm not a transportation engineer. However, it did not suggest that the transportation demand would create any undue stress on the neighborhood.
And back to whether or not this is premature then for us to be dealing with it, because it would have been very beneficial for this committee to have had a copy of that transportation plan if we're looking at this kind of concern from members in the community and not understanding the context. Wondered whether or not we should be looking at a 2-week deferral on this so that we would have a chance to have that as part of our materials. I see Mr. Bolduc would like to join us. I'm sure he has an answer. So go ahead, Mr. Bolduc, looking for your thoughts.
Hi, thanks. No, I've been involved in this file for 6 years now, over a couple different clients. And so there was an originally TIA that was completed for the zoning bylaw amendment that was eventually appealed, and it was resolved at the LPAT. And then we had another site plan application for virtually this same building. As you would note, it's just a reduction of the amount of parking and then an increase in the number of units, but virtually the box is the same. slight change in the front yard setback, but no zoning changes. So at the pre-consultation meeting, it was identified that a TIA technically hits the triggers. I believe it was our proximity to Richmond Road, but because it's an overall reduction in the parking, fewer trips generated, there's not any anticipated negative impacts. So we were essentially providing an update letter to the original study that was completed for the site plan, the last site plan.
So that doesn't seem to speak to the impact on the congestion from a street parking standpoint, though. It only seems to talk about fewer cars on the road, so the lanes are going to work and are going to, in fact, flow better, but it doesn't tell us it doesn't provide any kind of support to your request for a reduction in parking, though.
So the concern is that we're increasing the number of units, but that they're effectively is the same number of street parking spaces, correct? And that the TIA analysis would provide maybe some further detail on those impacts on the existing street parking? Is that the information?
We
that you're
would want
seeking?
to, because we know that there is going to be increased street parking. It happens. There's not going to be, the zoning bylaw says you need to provide 25 and you're not. You're asking for less. So what we're saying is, what is your evidence then, based on the transportation impact studies that you've done, that would tell us that in fact it's okay because street parking, is only at 75% capacity right now, or there's on-street parking permits, or like, so I guess we're looking for that kind of evidence then.
Okay, so we don't have the TIA with us. It's being prepared in support of the phase 3 application. We need to get through this in order to get to the phase 3, but I think the impasse that you're identifying is where's that analysis for this variance to allow you to proceed to the phase 3. I guess what I would offer up is more of a policy orientation. If you look specifically at policy 414 of the official plan, it notes that there's plans through the new zoning bylaw effectively to reduce or eliminate parking requirements in specific areas. That includes areas that are up to 600 meters from a rapid transit station. We're at 350, and also areas that are within a certain number of meters from the transit priority corridor. So I understand that you're asking for direct evidence from the transportation consultant and effectively a TIA for this parking reduction. It's not a requirement for the variance. And I would note that the policies generally support the reduction, which is why we did not submit a TIA for this application.
Yeah, it supports a reduction in the number of parking spaces, but you're asking for a variance from the zoning bylaw to further reduce from what that policy would suggest. So, so yes, we would be, and it's funny, you would say that we don't need that evidence, and yet it's the kind of technical evidence that I think would specifically speak to whether or not this is a good minor variance to be supporting. Anyway, I'm going to leave it at that because we don't have it with us. So, I guess we're going to have to make some decisions on that basis. All right.
Could I just make one comment, if it's okay?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Gray.
So this file has gone on for years in Westboro, and it had its controversies. So there has been those traffic studies, and unfortunately, I have to read those studies, and they're complicated for a layperson. But I never see in those studies where specifically they talk about the impact on street parking. So, I mean, these guys would know a heck of a lot more about it than I do. But even if they were able to produce one of those traffic studies from the previous applications at planning committee, I don't think you would see any evidence one way or the other about on-street parking. And I'm not saying that it shouldn't be there, but I don't think that it's something we see at all.
Mr. Gray, I agree with you that, often transportation studies are about the amount of cars in a lane and how many can get through. That's what it's about. It's about the pipeline. It's not about the impact. When you have an application where you're specifically asking for a reduction, though, in something like parking, looking at, to me, and I have seen transportation reports that have looked at what the environment is as further evidence to support. So it doesn't sound like it was done in this case, and that's fine. It's just that's, when we're looking at the kind of evidence that we would prefer to have. But that said, we're going to deal with what we have.
It's good to know. And as far as the community association is concerned, if that's something the committee wants to see, we can request that when we are consulted by the developers, that is sure, we'd happy to ask for that in advance of them even coming here. So if you tell me you've seen something like that before, that, I'm gonna write that down. And if there's, in the future, we see an application like this where there may be a very serious impact on, street parking, because like I said before, we get a zillion, calls about that. And I agree that maybe that is something we should be starting to, hear about.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gray. So, okay, so I'm going to open it up to whoever's next. Yep, come on down.
Mr. Blatherwick had his hand.
Madam Chair, could I ask?
Oh, was it a question for Mr. Gray?
No, just a comment, Madam Chair.
Okay, so just hold your thought for a moment. Come on down to the new speaker. We're going to take your name and your municipal address, and then we're going to go to Member Blatherwick.
My name is David Morgan, Morgan. I live at 440 Athlone Avenue. That's just south of Byron, a little distance away from this particular site.
All right, thank you, Mr. Morgan. We're just going to pause you for a moment. Go back to Mr. Blatherwick. Mr. Blatherwick, you had a comment.
Yeah. In my profession as a professional geographer, I've done a lot of parking demand studies. And quite frankly, on this street, one should have been done, Madam Chair. And we should have that information. And that would tell us very clearly whether or not this further reduction in parking from the zoning bylaw will or will not have an impact. And
right, thank you.
they are, believe it or not, they are easy to do. And you can do them relatively quickly. And if we adjourn for 2 weeks, that could be undertaken and completed within a 2-week period, not a problem.
All right, thank you, Member Blatherwick. Looking for thoughts from Member Keklikan then.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's a question to the agent. I just want some clarification, please. The decision to have the 15 parking spaces, was that based on policy? Because you mentioned both policy or analysis that was done with the data on parking and transportation demand.
Essentially, it came down to how much parking can you fit on one floor if we were to eliminate the second floor of parking. And so we came up with a total of 20. And the determination was made, should we make a reduction? If we truly are going to the 62 units as proposed, and we only have 20 parking spaces available, how should that be allocated? We had discussions with staff about should we equally reduce the amount of resident parking and visitor parking, say 2 visitor parking reduction and then increase the amount of resident parking. And the determination was made through consultations with staff through the pre-consultation process for the site plan that they would actually prefer to keep the visitor parking spaces specifically for the reasons that you've discussed, that there's a concern from the community about the availability of on-street parking. And so the decision was made not to reduce the visitor parking, to provide the 5 that are required. And therefore, all of the reduction from 25 to 15 is required for the resident parking. The supporting evidence for that, as I mentioned, is specifically the policies in the official plan with respect to proximity to transit. We can't forecast what's coming through the zoning bylaw, but I would note this area is not Area Z, like other areas that are as close to new transit stations like Tunney's. So the determination was made through working with staff that this would be a reasonable reduction, given that there's no anticipated impact. I know I'm repeating myself at this point overall, recognizing that the committee has identified a desire for a parking study, which I personally have not been asked for on such a reduction previously.
Thank you. Just a follow-up, if I may, Madam Chair. The other factor probably, I think you mentioned briefly, is cost, right? The cost of providing underground parking. That was an element that in your thinking.
Correct. To go back to my first point, the determination was made that we could only afford the owner could only afford 1 level of underground parking. So that limited our number of parking spaces. We have 20. How are they allocated?
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we are back to Mr. Morgan. So Mr. Morgan, you have 5 minutes, so go ahead, please.
Okay. So I'm known to Mr. Gray. I occasionally turn up at the Westboro Community Association and recently undertook to, at the initiative of the city, to get involved in the parking study that is just in the process of going on for the area as a whole. So that's partly where my interest came from on this. I'm also interested in the fact that I think it's an ideal building. It's a rental building. I've lived in Westboro for 43 years now, and my wife and I are looking to move to something smaller, and this would fit the bill. So that's why I've got an interest in it. I'm a little bit confused why the proponents have gone to 15 spaces. In the materials that were circulated with the notice of this meeting, there are 25 2-bedrooms and 2 3-bedrooms in the current proposal. And those are the size of units that would tend to suggest people need a car because there's 3 or 4 people possibly living there. And it shows, as I think you're describing, that there's enough room actually for, it looked to me like 23 parking spaces because there's one bay that you haven't allocated for parking. And therefore, I guess my question would be, why would you reduce from the 23 that are available to you when you probably got that amount of demand in the building? Why would you not say, okay, for cost reasons, I don't want to go to a second floor, but I can manage 23. I'll put 2 or 3 of those for visitor parking, and then there would be 20 available to the rest. I think the problem that we're getting here, came up in the study when I was talking with the city parking people on behalf of the community association, is that we don't have a measure of how much we want to reduce parking spaces, and therefore I would recommend that you don't want to reduce it further than the 23 you can get in, as they have currently suggested. I'm not sure that there's any valid measure of that, notwithstanding the sort of parking studies that you were talking about. This is more global look at how much parking do you need if you're going to reduce it. And we're not against reducing the number of parking spaces, but why would you reduce it further than the what's reasonable with it in terms of how much space you've got there on one floor?
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. I'm going to open it up to the committee members for questions for Mr. Morgan.
Sorry about my voice.
Oh, okay, so thank you for your comments, Mr. Morgan. I understand, you know, we've been, I guess, talking about the whole parking and the, you know, the justification for the reduction to that particular number. So thank you for your comments in that regard. I think it supports some of the concerns and comments that we've been making up to now. So thank you. All right, so before I make another call out to anybody else, Mr. Bolduc, you wanted to say something?
Yep, thanks, Madam Chair. Just to respond directly to the comments made, there is one, as identified in the parking plans before you, there is one bay that there could potentially be 3 spaces. Our concern is that we're going through site plan. And at site plan, there's always something that comes up with respect to mechanical, where this needs to go, et cetera. So we were very comfortable knowing that there was going to be at least 20 parking spaces, potentially 23. And if our client were to be able to put 23 parking spaces, they absolutely would. Those spaces rent, then they're usable and they help with the functionality of the building. It's adjacent to a mechanical room. If for any reason the mechanical room were to have to bump out by a foot, all of a sudden we're shrinking the number of spaces. Effectively, we're keeping that bay as a contingency. And we believe that the evidence we've provided supports the 15 resident parking spaces that we're proposing, again, due to its proximity to transit and what we're anticipating through the policies of the official plan. Potentially parking reductions, minimum parking reductions, or even eliminations in this area.
All right, thank you, Mr. Belzic. Okay, last call out. Anybody else would like to come forward and speak to the committee on this application? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody else. I guess we're looking for 2-minute wrap up, either from yourself, Mr. Belzic, or your colleague.
It's, I think it's fairly straightforward in terms of what the variance is, so I don't want to get back into that. I would just reiterate that given the fact that we've discussed with Immediate neighbors, we've had good discussions with Mr. Gray from the WCA, and I welcome his comments. The evidence put forward through the policy discussion of the official plan for reducing parking adjacent to transit and transit priority corridors, of which we are both in proximity. The discussions we've had with staff about this and just the general direction of the building from a luxury condo to a purpose-built rental, we think the project is moving 100% in the right direction. It's 10 parking spaces. We recognize that there may be some concern from the committee, from what we've heard, about the availability of on-street parking. Transit proximity is certainly a factor in that discussion. I would not be looking to push the committee towards making a decision if they felt uneasy about the application, but I would hope that the evidence we put forward would calm those concerns.
All right, thank you, Mr. Beldick. I believe we're going to be reserving on our decision. So you will get the written decision, as you know, within the 10 days. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
That brings us to the last application, which is number 7 for 304 Fairmont. Good afternoon. All right, just before we get started, I just have a very quick housekeeping matter that I have to address with you. In the notice, there was a reference to the ward that talks about 20 Osgood, which is not that ward. It's actually Ward 15, Kissitchippy. Oh, my goodness. I did not get that right. My apologies on that, but can I confirm with you that that's the right, that we need to change the word reference?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, good. I just need to get that confirmation from you on the record so we can make that change to the notice. So thank you. All right. Again, no presentation required. I'm opening it up to questions from the committee. Anyone? Okay. If nobody has, Ms. Young, are you still there? Because I have a quick question for you on this in relation to the securities. So we have a situation here where we're asking for securities to be retained for some future design for the trees. And so, you know, typically securities have some sort of finite time frame with them. And this actually says that it's 2 years from occupancy, which again, doesn't give you any guarantees about what that is. I just need to hear, like, is this the direction we're going in with regards to securities in general? Because this is the first time I've seen securities requested without a sunset on them. Can you just give me a little background on that, please?
Thank you for the question. This is the standard condition that we've always applied to sites that that don't have plans, and the intent is to sell them for future development. So we haven't changed the wording to remove a sunset clause. I agree that is probably something that would be something worth looking at, and we can work with legal on that. But right now, the intent, because we don't have any assurance of when development will happen on these lots, it's basically to ensure that securities are taken for city trees and maintained until there is development on the site. If there is a situation that arises where, you know, a site isn't going to be developed or something, then I think we'll need to deal with that through the agreement, but we don't have that in place right now.
Okay, perhaps, you know, in the past, I've seen that condition, and because perhaps we saw what was going to happen, I guess I must have missed that, where we've looked at this condition in relation to lots being created where there's no development that's before us. And I'm looking at your condition number 4, which relates to having, and I take it that this is for you're looking for a tree, hang on here. You submit a tree planting plan, and that would be applicable to the lot retained? Ms. Young, or the lot being created?
Be for both. So it's basically what we're seeking and what we've now received from the applicant is a tree information report showing the allowable footprint on the site and basically what kind of development could happen and what the tree impacts would be associated with that. We know it's conceptual. It's not likely going to be what is built, but it does indicate how many trees will be impacted and essentially which ones, and that determines what the compensation trees would be. So we're just looking essentially for another conceptual planting plan showing how many trees could fit on the lot, how many of the required compensation trees could fit on the lot, whether that's the retained or severed lot, it doesn't really matter. It can be anywhere. It could be on neighbors' properties if there are impacts there as well. So it's
Okay,
just to have a conceptual frame in mind of what the tree impacts would be of the severance and how planting could account for the loss of trees.
Okay, so to clear the condition, which is, what I'm always concerned about, how do you get out of this? How do you, they would have to essentially give you a tree planting plan using, I guess, the maximum building envelope and the impact. Is that all right? Okay, I
Yep.
think I'm getting clear on how that all works. So, okay, thank you for that. Okay, any other questions from any of the members on this? Okay, then, Mr. Cox, you've had a chance to go through the conditions?
Yes, I have. I haven't seen the final document that was sent by Nancy Young, but I believe it's exactly what she sent to me. And that basically is where we included an option of an LOU in addition to a development plan,
Okay.
development agreement, sorry.
And no concerns?
No, as long as that's in there, that's good. Although I did have a quick question just to follow on from what you brought up, the security required. Are there sometimes situations where there's a sunset period on those? And the only reason I ask is because there's an option that some of the neighbors might just want to buy this property and never develop it. I mean, I don't think there's an issue with the security staying there forever and ever, but that's what would happen.
Okay.
And sorry, the question was, Madam Chair, if there's any examples. If there's not, that's not an issue. I'm just interested. Mm-hmm.
So typically, when there's securities for development, they're actually they'll be gradually reduced with ensuring that certain things are done. So so eventually, normally through a site planning process, you would see the reduction to zero, probably over the course of maybe 3 or 4 years. In this case, it's very specific. We're asking for securities on trees where there's no development proposed. So it's not so I think we heard from Ms. Young that there's no sunset as of today. It's just the way the condition is. And so, but I would imagine there's always room for discussion with the city on this, right? So it's not, even though the condition is there, you can clear it and do the tree information report, put your securities in, but that doesn't mean that the end of the discussion is there until you come in with a building permit. I think you could actually, have a discussion with the city about that. If you saw, as a good example that you raised, that in fact, there'll be no development because possibly the neighbors would purchase the lot. And in that case, there would be a good, a good rationale for, in fact, having that security removed. So.
Thank you. I'm happy with the conditions.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have no speakers on our list. So is there anyone, there's no one left in the audience, so is there anyone online who would like to speak to this application either for or against? Nope, it looks like we have no one left online as well. Sorry, Ms. Linker, go ahead, please.
Sorry, Madam Chair, just for the record, do you have a copy of the 3 forestry conditions that were sent yesterday afternoon?
No, I do not have the revised ones for this application. So, I will get a copy in just a moment. Does someone have that for me? All right, sorry, I was looking for a revised report and it turns out it's an email for that. Okay, did you want to just walk us through what this is then, Ms. Linker, just for the record, so we know what you're proposing?
Thank you. I might defer to Ms. Young on this, but I believe that the first condition was just revised a bit to include the option of doing a letter of undertaking instead of a development agreement if the city agrees to that. And Ms. Young can confirm what the changes to 2 and 3 are, or if there was any changes.
Thank you for that. I think that was the only change, was just the addition of the option of a letter of undertaking instead of a development agreement. So we're still working through that with legal.
Okay, that is helpful for me. Anyway, thank you for raising this. Because I am seeing that now that's an option. Maybe that's makes good sense to do that. And I believe even you, Mr. Cox, you referred to a letter of undertaking, right?
Understanding, yes, correct.
Yeah.
Madam
Okay.
Chair.
Okay, so that would be obviously your preference from what I can gather.
Yes, if it would expedite the process, absolutely.
Okay, so I think we can move on. So with that, all right. Did we get to the audience? There's nobody left. Okay, so we did that. Okay, any final words? Any final comments from anybody? Otherwise, it's back to Mr. Cox to recap.
I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay, I think we can make a vote on, take a vote on this. All right.
Yeah.
All those in favor? Okay, so for the record, the application is unanimously granted.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. And with that, any issues with adjournment at this point in time? Other business? Nothing from anybody? We're adjourned. Thank you.